on the computer. Okay, Harry, I'm actually really embarrassed to say this, but I've known you for a few years and I have no idea like how you've got into horses and why farriery. So can we start with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I am sitting here in front of you today because an ex-girlfriend suggested that I might like being a farrier, and I took her up on the offer.
No way.
Literally, I was 18, and I knew nothing about horses really prior to this. And yeah, I was sitting there, and she was going to be a farrier, but she wasn't in the end. And she said, "Look, I think you'll enjoy it." There was a farrier that was living opposite us, a guy called
Hmm.
Ashton Eyre. So I did some work experience with him and I really enjoyed it. But I was in between jobs and I started my next job and blah, blah, blah. And then a couple of years later, I saw a friend of mine called Duncan Riley down in East Sussex. And I ended up spending, 3 months doing work experience with him and another farrier. And then I went to Warwickshire College, did my pre-farrier course where I learned some really important things like don't walk around in flip-flops. Don't how to put on a head collar, what saddle looks like on a horse, those types of
No.
things. And then through college, I was really lucky to get my apprenticeship with a farrier called Ben Benson, who you also know. And then yeah, the rest is history. Really, I just really enjoy it, and that's how I managed to get here. Didn't learn.
So
I didn't
hang
learn.
on
I
I
didn't
did
learn to
not know
fly
that.
until I was 22, 23, something like that.
Right. And that okay, but before what were you doing before like the
I was doing
apprenticeship?
outdoor education. So
Okay.
I was like climbing, abseiling, all of that jazz. That was my
Yeah.
interest. And
Okay.
yeah,
And then that must have been like a massive, well, obviously not reality shock because you were watching people with horses. So that intrigues me. So was it the actual way of just making money with the horses, or is it with like was it like this is amazing what these guys can do with metal on
I
a
think
horse's
it was a
foot?
com I think it was a combination of things. I have never liked working inside. And so I think that was part of it. It was a job where you're always outside.
Mm.
I regret that now at times, but anyway. Um, and it was a job where you use your hands and it's very hands-on, and it's a very physical job, and that is what I wanted. At the time, my hobbies were climbing and like hiking and mountaineering and stuff like that. And I was finding that my job was impeding with my hobbies.
Mhm.
And I just didn't want to do my hobbies at the weekend because I was doing it all week. I suppose there might have been a monetary side of that, but that pretty much died as soon as I realized that there's no money in horses. Uh, so, but yeah, I just really enjoyed. I think I really enjoyed being outside, and I really enjoyed the fact that it was really hands-on, and you could make and you can make such a change within such a short period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I can't believe I've known you. How long have I known you? Has it been like 10 years?
no, I've been qualified for 10 years, so it must be
Six?
12, 13 years.
Oh yeah, because you were apprenticeship,
Yeah,
weren't you,
I
with
was doing my
Ben?
apprenticeship with Ben when we met.
Yeah. God, I did not know that. I actually, when I was thinking about questions to ask you, I was like, I need to ask him this because I've known you for so long and I've no idea. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So if it
And
wasn't for a lady called Layla Harris, I would, yeah, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you today.
gosh, there you
Really.
go. And then, so you have actually ridden horses, about 23. But again, have you ever competed or anything like that?
No, so I enjoy riding. I just don't really have the time for it anymore. I've never competed. I can ride English and Western. I can ride Western
Nice,
better than I can ride English.
nice.
Uh, and yeah, I say I can ride, but if you speak to my wife, she will tell you another story.
I was
I'm,
gonna say you've got
I'm,
because she's got a horse, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a great instructor.
Shall I ask her the same question?
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Okay.
There's videos on online of me like teaching the girls, which is hilarious.
Okay, I'll need to look at these. And then obviously Farrier comes under so many different brackets of like barefoot. Where do you sit in the farrier industry at the moment? Like how has your role progressed from working with Ben Benson, who we know is working with performance horses. Like, how have you developed your own kind of stamp and USP, and what do you currently do?
I'd say when I was working with Ben, the philosophy was do what's best for the horse. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be shod or barefoot, but what's best for that horse, for the job that it's doing, etc., etc. So now that I'm on my own, we've got a team around me, but I've carried that forward. I would say that my workload now is quite varied, from performance horses that are gunning for, Olympics, high-end competitions, to pony at the bottom of the field that just wants a bit of help. And we get called in to do a lot of like lameness work when kind of hasn't really been going well, and we just come in and do bits and bobs, and then hopefully transition it out of whatever we put onto it. Now, for some horses, that's actually taking everything off and taking them barefoot. But the barefoot journey is not for everybody or for every horse, because there's a lot to that, rather than just saying we're going to take the shoes off. I'd say I've probably got quite a holistic approach to it now.
I actually didn't know that about the do what's good for the horse or the best for the horse. And
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with you there. It's almost like we have a set of skills, but you just adapt it to what's in front of you, no matter, even if you sometimes think, oh, I know exactly what it needs, but maybe from like the management perspective or from the owner's expectations or what the owner can do, you have to just adapt accordingly.
Yeah. And I've lost and gained clients because I've told people that their horses should be barefoot when they're shod, and that they should be shod when they're barefoot. Because
and is it, if I just really like dumb this down for anyone listening, so can a horse go completely barefoot once they've been shod, and vice versa? Like, are you going to have a massive impact on the horse's body?
It depends on the horse. So I'd say a lot of horses that are not in that much work will cope, or not even not in that much work, but it depends on the horse and the horse's type and the horse's body. A lot of cobs that are shod probably go barefoot, but then I've also known cobs that are barefoot that hate being barefoot and really like being shod, and vice versa. A lot of thoroughbreds, you think of a thoroughbred, and yes, people have successfully taken them barefoot, but you look at their feet and what they're bred for, and actually some of them just need a bit more help, but it's with shoes. But then you've got environmental factors to cope. So for example, Chino, my wife's horse, he's in a set of shoes with pads in front. Now he's got various issues going on anyway, but he has the pads on because when they hack out, the first thing they hit are stones about that big on a path, and he can't cope with that. So we put pads and packing in there. Now that helps his arthritis as well, but he wouldn't be able to cope without shoes on, because of the environment he's in, and also his conformation. So for a horse, if you've got a horse that's got a foot like that, for example, so at an acute, or a limb and a hock and a stifle and a hock and a limb that's all at a wonky angle, if you put a bit of steel underneath it, or a bit of aluminium or a composite plastic that's sticking out at that side, you can support the limb that's above that, and you can support it with a shoe. You can't do that if it's barefoot. So if it's lame because of a conformational reason, the chances of you getting that back with a barefoot horse are slim, because there's nothing propping up that limb. And a lot of it is obviously down to muscular problems as well, because once they've got a problem, as you're well aware, you've got the muscular aspect of the horse above that's not correct and not right. But then you're going chicken and egg, and what are you trying to help?
Yeah, it's fascinating hearing your brain go, because I'm almost listening to you and then asking similar questions, where the more, I don't know if you would agree or disagree with this, but I feel like the more years I've been doing this, the more I kind of don't know because of all the new technology advances and the more we know about horses from biomechanics. I question myself, even from adjusting the body, thinking, right, should I actually be doing this adjustment? Instead of when I first started, it was, I have my treatment. There's no massive contraindications, or the vet, the horse isn't lame. I'm going to treat the horse because that's what I've been taught. But as the years have progressed, I start to question myself because we work holistically and looking at the horse, and I'm almost starting to go, do you know what? Actually, should I even be doing that adjustment? I can do the adjustment, but what effects am I having lower down, higher up? And then also, should I be talking to the farrier first? Because if he's got his ideas, which we all do, about changing the way that limb is loading, and then what effect that's going to have on the body higher up. But then I'm thinking, if I then going to do that adjustment, will I be making the limb more unstable? And so it's interesting hearing
Yeah.
you talk like that. And would you agree, has your shoeing changed significantly to when you like first set out on your own?
I wouldn't say it's changed significantly. Um, I'd say that if I went, I think it's just evolved over
Mm.
time, and with my own mental thought processes on life and the world and horses and the universe. I'd say that my shoeing has just evolved to feel my thought process at that time. Um, and I think and I agree with you actually, where when you first qualify, you think you're king of the world because you pass your dip, which is, so for those of you that don't know that are listening in the UK, to qualify to practice as a farrier, you have to be either a vet or you have to be a diploma qualified farrier, which is a
Mhm.
4 year, 2 month apprenticeship. So you pass that, and understandably, you feel that you're king of the world when you've passed that because it's a 4 years of your life and it's a hard exam at the end of it. And I think it's probably got harder since I did it. But um, what you fail to realize is that actually you don't really know anything because you've been gunning for this exam, and this exam is just an exam to prove that you're safe. Now, I
Yeah.
was very lucky with it, studying training under Ben, and that we were working on high level, high performance horses, and I was shoeing them on my own, and I was doing some really complicated stuff that was probably beyond a lot of people's comprehension anyway. But because I was being guided through that process, it went really well, and I was really
Mm.
lucky. Um, but I've definitely gone through evolutions of my shoeing where you look back on some photos and you go, I wonder what I was actually thinking of that, because
Mm.
I don't quite know. Like looking at that now in relation to where my shoeing is, you don't, I don't quite know where I was
Yeah.
rolling with that at the time. Um, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because obviously everything evolves and all horses are different as well. And this is what you've got to, and what people don't really realize sometimes. And I think owners don't necessarily realize, as they've seen something on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever. And I'm just as bad for that as everybody else is. But, and they go, oh, this will help my horse. And actually their horse doesn't respond well to it. And
Mm.
it's probably not even the application of what's going on to it. It's probably just the fact that their horse is one of these horses that doesn't like that and likes the complete opposite.
Mm. And
Um,
I love hearing the word evolve. That's actually a nice way of putting it, as opposed to like changing. Um, for those of us who don't actually know, obviously we know what farriers do, but when you are coming to a new horse, how do you start your process besides just picking the foot up and trimming and putting the shoe on?
um, so I like to assess horses statically and dynamically. I tend to, if it's standing there when we get there, I tend to be looking at it more than I'm trying to reverse, because that can tell you quite a lot about the animal. The first time we shoe something, I like to walk it up and trot it up, and that doesn't necessarily happen every time, but that's because actually you can assess a lot from just watching it walk out of his box. And I think this is, people don't realize how much equine professionals are actually looking at their horses or listening to their horses, um, because we'll have multiple So there's 3 of us that work, or 2 other, 1 apprentice and 1 farrier that work with me, and we will quite often have 3 horses out at once. But that doesn't mean that I'm not watching every horse walk past me and listening to every horse that's being shod, and as it's walking towards us and walking away. But yeah, so for an initial viewing, we watch it statically. We look at it statically. We look at it dynamically. If I need to watch the rider ride it, then I'll watch the rider ride it. 'Cause sometimes you get the conversation of, well, it's sound at the moment, but when I sit on top of it, it's lame. And without beating around the bush too much, normally that's because the rider can't ride, or is sometimes too heavy for the horse that they have.
I was gonna say, I think from like the body perspective here, I'm thinking if it changes that much with the rider on, then there's something got to be in that area of where the rider sat, versus, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, versus like what the farrier can do if it's presenting maybe with discomfort from the minute you take out the stable or increase the gait. But again, what's your thoughts on that?
So I'd say if it's lame when the rider's riding it, but it's sound when the rider's not riding it, that's out of my jurisdiction, essentially, because it's definitely not to do with the feet.
Yeah.
It might be that the horse is lame when it's ridden over stones, in which case that is in my jurisdiction, but then it's normally a little bit postury when it's being walked over stones. Prime example being Chino, our horse. But yeah, but if it's lame in walk and in trot, or it's just got mild levels of discomfort and it's maybe 1/10 lame or 2/10 lame, then we can, depending on what's going on, help that with some form of shoeing package, being it gluing something onto the foot or nailing something onto the foot or fitting it with a pair of hoof boots. Tends to be that if it's barefoot and it's lame, then it tends to be that it just needs a bit of protection all the time, not just when it's being ridden. So hoof boots, great, and especially in the context of it goes a little bit sore when I ride it, but it's fine the rest of the time. So you put a pair of hoof boots on it, it's sound when you ride it, you take them off again, it's sound in the field. Everybody's happy. Don't need to worry about lost shoes. You do need to worry about lost hoof boots, but you don't need to worry about lost shoes. Swings and roundabouts. Whether it's more natural or not, I tend to argue against that, because you're sitting on top of the animal, and that is 100% unnatural. They're used to a lion jumping on its back and then it disappearing into the distance because it can't cope with life because it's a prey animal. So I think the whole natural argument is ridiculous. And I think that some people, and this might be slightly controversial, but some people try to impart their human values onto an animal that doesn't know what those values are. So I've had a few people in the past going, well, I believe in this or that, and I want my horse to follow suit. And you're like, that's fine, but your horse is lame.
Yeah.
And it was sound with shoes on, and now it's lame because we've taken the shoes off it. And those people we don't work with, because I can't work with somebody that doesn't have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I digress slightly.
No, it's fine.
But
I wanted to actually ask you, just again, with obviously from my perspective, being the body worker, if we subjectively believe that a horse is lame, we are not allowed to treat. We would have to say, we can't treat, give back. What does and how does it work from your perspective, being the farrier, if you're thinking, and I mean, obvious lameness, we know you're going to send it to the vet, but something that's like, or maybe not, because pus on the foot can definitely be really, really lame, and they just say get a farrier anyway. So where does it stand from the farrier perspective, and mild lameness to obvious lameness?
So I think if you look at the Veterinary Act, technically, if we are allowed to do emergency first aid. So we can dig out pus in the foot if we're there to do it. But technically, it's the vet's job. So
Yeah.
technically, with every infection that you dig out, you should let the veterinary surgeon know that you have dug out an infection on that horse's foot. In theory, that doesn't happen in real life, I don't think. I tend to try and let all of our vets know, but
Yeah.
some fall through the gaps. So farriers are, again, I believe, and I might be wrong in this, but I believe that farriers are the only professionals that are allowed to work on a horse without veterinary consent.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And I
That
might be
makes
wrong.
sense.
I might be wrong with that. I know it's obviously changed recently for physios to you're not allowed to work on lame horses, or physios and back professionals in general. You're not allowed to work on lame horses, but you don't. Am I right in saying you don't need to seek consent now to have a look at a sound horse?
Maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah.
That the word is maintenance, or like you say, there's no underlying issues. But let's face it, by the time people normally inquire about having body work, it's because they feel the horse is not right.
Yeah.
So it's a very gray area. But yes, it has changed recently. Here in the UK, I know it's different in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, everything we're talking about is UK based.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're allowed to look at lamenesses. Obviously, if it's a major lameness, then it goes straight back to the vet. Normally, if it's that bad anyway, I would have already spoken to the vet. If it's we get there and it's visibly lame and it looks like it's coming from foot soreness, then we can deal with that. Quite often what we'll do is we will try something, but we'll also refer it back at the same time, and then I'll have a chat with the vet and say, look, this is what we've done. Looking at it confirmationally, it's got X, Y, and Z going on. I've done something, probably a pair of nuts and packing and some form of shoe on there to give it a bit of support. Normally a bit of a wider shoe as well and a bit of a longer shoe, so you give support to the back of the foot. And just prop it up essentially. But it then gets referred back, and I'll also speak to their body worker because it's important that we are on the same lines. And it's also important. So if I end up wedging something, for example, I don't use wedges that often, but I do like a wedge when the occasion when it needs it. But I feel that if I jack something up again and it's living in essentially a high heel for a 4 or a 5 week rotation, then within a few days of doing that, I would want a body worker to go out and have a look at it, or definitely within a week, because then because you've got postural adjustments, which hopefully will be for the better, but you will have postural adjustments because of that, and vice versa. If I take it out of a wedge, I'd also want a body worker to go out and have a look at it because you've got postural adjustments for that.
And like, it's actually one of my questions I was going to ask, because I know how you work. We've said we work holistically. We want to work together as a team. I suppose in the ideal world, you'd have, for especially a new client or someone who was struggling with an undiagnosed, unexplained lameness, would have the farrier, the vet, the physio, chiro, whoever, saddle fitter, dentist, all there at the same time. But the reality is, with people's schedules and liaising that is quite hard to do. How often does it happen, though, this bridge of communication, say, with your body worker? I know the vet's different, and I seem to be able to speak to a vet, especially if I'm concerned in terms of I won't treat animal, therefore I need to speak to the vet. But how is it with, well, I've certainly found it more trickier to communicate with farriers, not in general, just in some cases, without upsetting the farriers. So I suppose the conversation is, how would you want body workers to come up to you if they weren't, say, disagreeing with the shoeing, but they were just saying, I've done A, B, and C above the distal limb, which might affect the loading stance phase? How do you want that communication to be presented to you?
I don't know if I'm different to other farriers, but I quite just, as you put it, like I've changed. I've looked at it, trot up, it's done this. Do you think you can help it underneath? That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like for me personally, but I've got the body workers and the vets and the other farriers that I work with on a regular basis. I'd like to think that I've got a really good rapport with, and we just have a normal conversation, like even a text conversation. I saw so and so today, it was doing this, just to let you know. And
Yeah.
then I know that they'll pick it up and they'll go, cool, right. I'll bear that in mind. I'll have a look later. Or for them to go, I've seen so and so today, it's a bit tight through X, Y, and Z. Looks like it's changed its loading and landing slightly. Can you have a look at it when you're next there? And I'll go, yeah, not a problem. That's fine. We'll sort it out. I know that historically, some farriers have been harder to talk to than others. I think that's changing with the new generation of farriers that are, or I'd like to think that's changing with the new generation of farriers that are coming through, because actually the world is an evolving place, and we are all in more of a better communication, better or worse communication. I have two phones for a reason, so one of them can be thrown under a bus occasionally and just left on the side. I don't need to talk to anybody. But it's I think that a quick phone call or a quick text, for me, especially a WhatsApp, because I can then read that. I hate a voice note. Voice notes annoy me because I can't read it. So with a voice note, you listen to it and you're like, I need to listen to that 4 times to get the information. Whereas a text message, you just go, yeah, that's fine. I'll text that. I'll sort that out in a minute. Anyway, I
So
digress.
you're a visual learner. You
I
like
am
to see it.
100% a visual learner.
Yeah.
But for me, just a text message or a phone call works
And
really well.
let's play like devil's advocate. You're obviously been in the industry a while now, so you've built the community, the rapport and the relationships. But if you were starting out, and especially I get this a lot if I've gone to a new area, a new client, and I believe that the shoeing can be altered or adjusted because of how much I've done higher up. And
Yeah,
then it's a case of saying, right, either I always say to my owners, if you can let your farrier know that I'm going to contact them, so it's not just
yeah,
a random message from a stranger, obviously also to for data protection, if they're happy for me to take their phone number, but most of us working out there know that people have our numbers for what we do. But is it that simple thing of saying to an owner, um, if you do have a body worker that's coming out, please let me know if they've done anything, and vice versa. From my perspective, to say to the owner, please give the farrier or let your farrier know I'll be messaging them. And it'll be a simple message of, hi, Harry, today I've seen so and so, and I've done A, B, and C, which might affect B, D, and E. Can you change or would you suggest anything different from a shoeing perspective? Thank you, Nika.
yeah. And that would be fine. For me, that would be fine.
Mm,
And actually,
mm,
I might turn around to you and go, well, I tried giving it support and it pulled it off 4 times in a row and I've given up.
yeah, yeah.
And it's turned out in a bog. And, the management side of it, although they've told you that it's X, Y, and Z, it actually isn't.
Mm,
And that's also fine, because then you've had that line of communication. For me,
mm,
when I first started, I just rang everybody up.
mm,
It's like, just let you know, I just shot this horse.
mm,
I know you're coming out tomorrow. Let me know how it feels.
mm.
Sorted.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
from a business point of view, the more that you can open yourself up to other professionals, the better the outcome, because then they know that you're approachable.
Mm.
And I got work off the back of that straight away, because actually people were going, well, I can talk to this guy.
Mm.
I'm not.
And what about the owners who are a little bit tentative about saying, I often get the question of, if I say, can I speak to a farrier? I look at the owner's face and I might have the withdrawal back of like,
So
ooh,
again,
I'm not sure that's a good idea.
I think that's really hard. And my argument for that would be, should they be using that farrier?
Mm.
Because if that farrier is not willing, or any professional isn't willing to talk to another professional, just like if I have an owner and I go, look, I really need to talk to your physio, and they go, we don't want you to, I'll go, well, what's the point of me
Yeah,
being here?
yeah,
But I think if you've got somebody that won't talk to another professional, then they're not being professional about that. You don't go to a GP surgery and the GP goes, oh, can I can I have your notes from your last GPs? And you go, no, 100% you can't. They're going to go, well, this is a bit weird.
Yeah,
Like,
I need
what's
some
going on?
history.
You don't go and have your knee done and go, and the knee surgeon goes, I'm just going to talk to your GP for why they referred you, and you go, no, you're not. I don't think that's a good idea. They're going to communicate. You know what I mean? It's not. And I
It's
know,
funny when you actually give that example, it makes total sense, and we all know that. But it is, I do find that as much as there's been so many advancements in the horse world, sometimes the actual fundamental communication barriers are still there. And I think when we break that down, I believe we're going to solve a lot more of these unexplained lamenesses, and owners will have more clarity and peace with knowing that, okay, today Harry's done this, 2 weeks after Nika is going to do this. So there might be a period where the training changes, and there might be a period when the horse doesn't feel as well as it could. But because I know what's happened and they've talking, we have a plan.
yeah.
I now know what to expect, and that's why I'm kind of deep diving into this
And
communication thing.
I agree with you completely, and I think communication should be transparent, and I think it should be, and it's not necessarily that people need to get back to you straight away, and I think that's really important. I have my wife does all of our office stuff, so actually communication for our clients is, like, to think, relatively easy because they text her,
Mm.
and then my work phone stays on silent, and then I check it when I'm in between appointments because I
Yeah.
feel it's really rude if I'm in don't get me wrong, there are times where my phone's going off left, right, and center because I'm waiting for vets to ring me, or I
Mm.
need to talk to a client about something that we did or something that we're going to do, and blah blah blah. But 99% of the time, communication goes through Emily, and Emily goes, right, I'll just send a load of stuff to Harry that he needs to deal with, but the clients know that I will always get back to them.
Mm.
It just might not be straight
Immediate.
away
Yeah.
because I feel that if I'm under a horse, then that horse is taking priority.
Mm.
Because that client is paying me at the time, and if
Yeah.
I can multitask to an extent. I can have 3 horses out in front of me and know exactly what I'm doing to all 3 of them. But if I've got a multitask that much that the phone's going off 12 times, then
Yeah.
I just, yeah, no, life's too short for that. But communication should be easy. It should be easy
Mm.
to go, hi, blah, blah, blah. I've just seen this horse. What do you
Mm.
reckon? Do you think you need to make any changes based on what I've just told you? Or are are we happy going with the way forward? And I'd be quite happy with that because
Yeah.
now what I'm not happy with is, and it's happened before, is somebody's gone in and gone, this is shod. Why have they got these shoes on it? Blah blah blah. Or this is shod. Not how I'd like it to be shod. When it's not a vet, and a vet can say that because a vet
Mm.
is in charge. That's fine. If a vet turns around to me and what the monkeys were you doing here? Because I've no idea why you did this.
Mm.
And I can explain it, but they will probably turn around and go, can you change it? And I'll go, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I agree with them or not is another question, but they're in charge. But when somebody else, it's just like me going in, well, did your body worker feel this? Because it's definitely sore here. And they,
Mm.
oh, well, they were here yesterday and they said it was all fine.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say
Yeah.
that. So you wouldn't go, whereas I've had people before question what we're doing, not question, but dismiss what we're doing underneath, whereas actually there's been valid reasons for that. But rather than going, I'm not sure why they've put this shoe on, say for example,
Mm.
a natural balance shoe, I'm not sure why they put this natural balance shoe on. I'm going to give them a ring and have a chat rather than just
Yeah.
going, I don't think this horse needs these shoes on.
Mm.
And then that's how you get people's backs up. But having
And
an
I also think that's maybe why it's more important for the physio, chiropractor, osteo, and the farrier to talk, because I've been in, especially my early days when um we weren't taught about the true communication when we were
yeah,
qualified. It was just you get your qualification, you go out there
yeah,
into the big world and do
sort
it.
yourself out.
And early on in my working days, it was like, oh, I can see there's something going on with the way this horse is loading. And not a farrier, I always say that. But I would suggest or want to talk to your farrier to maybe do A, B, and C. But again, not saying he should do that. Let's talk to him. And instead of that happening in conversation between me and the farrier, went via the owner. It's a bit like Chinese whispers. By the time the farrier hears it, he might have heard, well, what is she a farrier now? And I think that's why, as physios and osteos and chiros, if we are wanting to know more about the feet, which we should do if we're treating holistically, it's actually worth us saying, oh, this is gone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. It's actually worth us saying, instead of saying to the owner what we think the horse needs, keep quiet about that and just saying, can I speak to your farrier, and then have that discussion professionally with the farrier, so that it doesn't get back to the farrier. The physio said it needs lateral extensions, when the farrier is going, well, no, because of A, B, and C.
But yeah, I agree. And I also think if you're going to have an argument over a horse, for a better use of a word, or if you're going to have a disagreement, don't do that with the owner present, because they don't need to know that you've been disagreeing. Because at the end of the day, you all want the same thing, which is to have a sound, happy horse.
Yeah.
And you're coming at that from different perspectives.
Mm.
So there's no point in going, well, I think he should have done this, or I think she should have done this, rather than just going, right, all right, I see your point of view, you see my point of view. So I had this the other day, actually. So we've been shoeing this yard for a little bit of time, but I never met their physio. And what she was saying kind of didn't contradict, but just wasn't how I felt the horses needed to be. But
as in from affecting from the shoeing perspective.
From a shoeing point of view, she was saying X, Y, and Z, and I was saying, well, that's not what I'm looking at. So I rocked up. We had a conversation at the yard while she was treating one of the horses, and it turns out we were on exactly the same page. She just didn't quite work out what I was saying, and I didn't quite work out what she was saying. Could have been done by a phone call, but it was a lot easier to do when I was on my way home anyway, just to pull into the yard and have a conversation with her while she was treating. We watched a couple of horses up together, you know, and actually that was well worth stopping in for half an hour and having a cup of tea, because it clarified for both of us that we were on the same page and we weren't enemy number one. We were just, and it was just the fact that, and it was a misinterpretation on the yard, not on their fault, but just because of the way that they passed that information on, meant that we were both a bit like, well, I don't quite know who each other's and who and what everybody was saying. So we just met up. And
yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's that we all have our own perception of assessment and perception of why a leg is moving in a way because of whatever we see. But if we honestly admit it to ourselves and take away all ego and all that, it's our experience and judgment. And that if we go into every horse thinking it's definitely this way and only that way, you're going to be wrong. Because I know, again, being more and more involved with horses, I'm proved wrong all the time because there's never a standard magic recipe treatment that's going to work. And there's always something that's going to catch you out. So I think the way you said that about understanding that your farrier is there to do the best job he can do, the back person or the chiropractor osteo is there to do the best they can do. However, if we actually had, if we're thinking that our perception is one way and the farrier is maybe not in alignment with us, just have that open conversation as opposed to talking to the owner. And that's actually, I think, will be a really useful take home from this as well. It's just that open communication and not Chinese whispers through the yard owner, or maybe even someone who's holding the horse who doesn't know the horse and just says, oh, the physio said, this needs this on, straight away to the farrier. That's how we're going to burn bridges.
Yeah, and I think you said ego is a really important thing as well. And I think shoe quite egoistic and farriery and hoof carriers, because everything you do to that horse is what you think it needs. And actually, when somebody questions that, they're questioning you and your skill set.
Yeah.
Rather than questioning a computer program. Or, you know what I mean? Or why this stuffed toy is I'm looking at a stuffed toy in front of me. Why it's the shape that it is? Well, it's the shape that it is because it's the shape that it is, and you
Mm.
could have bought any others. But when you're using a farrier or a chiro or a vet, and you question what they're saying, you are questioning their essentially their skill set.
Mm.
And I think this is what we forget is that everybody's human and everybody might have had a bad day that day, or suddenly
Hmm.
somebody was talking to them like shit earlier that day, or you know what I mean? There's a whole host of reasons that they might be grumpy when you turn around to them
Yeah.
and you go, when you were treating this horse last, did you notice X, Y, and Z? Because I saw it yesterday and it was really
Yeah.
sore
Yeah.
hamstrings. Or when you shod this horse last, did you notice that it was lame because
It's
I've just treated it and it was crippled lame in
yeah.
front.
Yeah.
You need to come out and have a look at it. You know what I mean? And actually, in a normal circumstances, that would
Mm.
have been a conversation that goes, "Oh no, I must have missed that," or "No, when I treated it,
Mm.
it was sound and it was good as gold."
Mm.
Whereas if you've had a bad day anyway, suddenly somebody sends you a text like that or a phone call like that, and you throw the phone out the window and you like drive over it and you shout, "I'm never going to talk to you again." And I think this is something we forget as is most equine practitioners are individuals. There's not many of
Mm.
us that work in teams, and it is the skill set of the individual person that you're calling into question, and it's not
Mm.
just the skill set of an inanimate object that's not doing its
Yeah.
job. It's a
I
doorstop that's broken.
I think seriously the take home message for everyone is actually like how you communicate, and even necessarily maybe some people are saying, well, I do communicate, but actually we need to actually think how we're doing it. And you're spot on. The world's changing so much with AI and robots and things like that, but actually our jobs will always be, well, unless a robot is taught how to shoe a horse or manipulate an animal's spine,
That's right.
it'll always be you're talking to a human with feelings, emotions, etc. So that is for me a real insight is actually how we do it and take that into our awareness before we just send a message that's like
Yeah. And
short.
I think from an owner point of view as well, they need to, and I think most owners are really good at this, but it's listening to what your professional's saying as well.
Mm.
Um, and actually, if somebody says, or if a farrier turns up to your horse and it's got a broken back hoof pass and axis, for example, so it's got long toes and it's got low weak heels, and they go, right, well, I think we actually need to put some pads and some packing on this or a bar shoe just to help it out, uh, because that's going to save you money in the long run, and it's going to save you on your physio appointments, and it's going to save you on your injections and blah blah blah. Rather than going, well, I don't want to pay the money for that, and that's all you're listening to is that it's going to cost you more money. Go, actually, this professional that's coming in, same with you guys, like I want to treat this on a 4 week rotation or
Mm.
a 8 week whatever it is. Um, then rather than going, well, this is going to cost me a lot of money now, thinking
Mm.
actually or listening to what they're saying and going, well, my horse is compromised, we can help it. Yeah, it's going to cost me more money, but essentially it's going to be a better in the long run for that animal. And I
Mm.
think, and also listen to what your professionals are telling you so you can pass it on to the next one without
Mm.
having that miscommunication.
Mm.
Um,
And just to, again, this is for my interest, and I know previous clients have also asked me this. When you rock up as a farrier, we've discussed like the lameness perspective, but is it totally in your experience and opinion, to put whatever shoe you feel like that horse needs on? There's no kind of standard practice. It's genuinely from your years of experience that you've done in the past, you can put whatever shoe you think that horse needs. It's purely on your feel and assessment.
yeah, I'd say so. I think that you work with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously, if a vet's been in beforehand and gone, look, I want this style of shoe on, and I want before I jumped on with you, I just had a quick call with a vet, and I wanted to do something to it, and he said, yeah, he agrees because he was going to suggest that anyway, which was just a shoe with a pad and packing. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you've had a vet turn around to you and go, I want X, Y, and Z on it, and you go, cool, that's fine, we'll do that.
Mm.
Um, if you think it's going to be harmful to the horse, then you'll argue the toss. I feel, because you can do, but I've had some quirky packages that I've put on for vets before that have actually turned out to work really well, and I've gone, well, fair enough, and like they've made their
Mm.
way into my practice because somebody suggested doing something that
Mm.
but yeah, 9 times out of 10, if I turn up somewhere and we're shoeing it, it's what is going on to that horse's foot, and the way that that shoe's profiled, or the way that that shoe
Mm.
is trimmed, that foot's trimmed, is directly how I view it at that time, and that
Yeah.
will change
Yeah.
dramatically, and it over the course of a year on how that
Mm.
horse is functioning. It might not change dramatically, but I'd like to think that it would change quite a lot, because obviously you're improving things as you go, so things
Yeah.
tweak and change. Pads and packing are pretty standard, I'd say.
Mm.
The
Well,
shoes,
this actually, sorry, goes on to the next question is technology is obviously advancing in from when you started to where you are now, like how has the shoe itself changed? And the only reason also asking is because I spent some time in Dubai and worked with a Moroccan farrier that picking up the different shoeing, so the different kinds of shoes, I thought, I've never seen shoes like this. Like, besides a standard horseshoe that we would draw as a child on a pad and paper, you've now got all kinds of different angles. Sometimes you'll even have the different width on the same foot. And you think, how is this? Like, how is this all being put together? Is this just by the farrier's eye, or are you guys actually learning new ways of shoeing
um,
and molding the shoe differently?
I would say that the essential horseshoe hasn't changed since,
Mhm.
give or take, the Roman invasion.
Mhm.
You're nailing. You there
Yeah.
still? Yeah, back in the room. Sorry, you froze for a minute. I would say that the central horseshoe, apart from the aesthetics of it and the fact that steel is rolled now, and
Mhm.
various other aspects, but hasn't really changed. So we're still
Okay.
nailing on a steel shoe, and we use a steel shoe as a general horseshoe for most working horses
Mhm.
because it is durable. It has slip properties, so it
Mhm.
allows that foot to land, load, slide, and then take off again.
Mhm.
And it's also easy to modify under heat, and you
Mhm.
can modify it cold if you need to. Over the last 10 years, all your composite shoes have come into play a lot more, and all your glues have improved a lot more for horses' feet. They've been great on aeroplanes for the last 70 years, but with horses' feet, they've taken a while to come through. And gluing processes have evolved because people
Mm.
about it. Composite shoes are around now, so like you've got your Duplo shoes and various other brands, which is so that's a composite shoe with a steel insert. The problem with all composite shoes is that your nail holes are already in there, so you can't adjust that. And if you're gluing them on, that's
Okay.
fish. But there's different properties that are
Mhm.
great, different properties that are not so great with them. Um, and then you've obviously got your aluminium shoes, which are a lot lighter, but they're a bit grippier. A lot of show jumpers will use aluminium shoes because
Mhm.
they've got that lightness to them, which that
They
extra, and
need.
obviously a lot of race horses will use alley plates when they're racing just to try and take that smidgen of weight off.
Mhm.
I would say, for me, apart from the advent, or the more advent of composite shoes on the market, and hoof boots are a big thing that have really become prominent in the last couple of years. I would say that shoeing hasn't, the principle
Altered.
hasn't altered. You're still putting on something to the bottom of that horse's foot that will affect its gait. And
Mm.
whether you use a grinder on it to take an edge off, or um, grind it down so you've got one side that's bigger than the other or thicker than the other to compensate for various things, whether you have a bar shoe on, whether you have a pad and packing, whether you have some funky sort of bar shoe on it, they're all the same principle, which is that you're trying to do something to the bottom of that foot that helps whatever is going on with that horse create a
Mm.
sound horse. So you've got clogs for laministics that have come in. The Stuart clog was developed I think in the 80s, but that's become a lot more
Mm,
prevalent today. And I think a lot of it is because of social media.
mm,
So when I started putting stuff online 10, 11, 12 years ago now, actually there wasn't a lot of farriers putting stuff online, whereas now
yeah.
there's loads, and some of it is a bit rubbish, and some of it is purely there for viewer entertainment. But some of it is amazing work that you're looking at and you're going, wow, that's a
Mm,
really good job. It looks really good. It makes sense why they've done it.
mm,
And I've definitely picked up stuff from using the internet web and looked at it and gone, I'm going to try that on X, Y, and Z at some point.
mm.
I think it would be
Yeah.
good.
I
I
saw,
think
yeah,
I
sorry. I saw a real magic happen with a horse that, this was in Dubai, that was sound one day, lame the next day. There was no obvious like abscess. However, when the vet scanned, there was inflammation of the lateral branch of the suspensory, and the farrier altered the shoe slightly to either support the loading phase of that lateral part of the foot. A horse was sound the next day, and it was a real kind of wow moment where you're like, nothing else changed, just the farriers, magic work,
yeah,
and subtle alteration in the shoe that had a big impact on the horse's soundness. So that's why I was asking about the shoeing.
yeah.
Has it actually changed?
I think so. I don't think shoeing itself has changed. Essentially, I think what the fundamental basics of shoeing hasn't changed.
Mm,
What has changed is certain products on the market, and obviously we've got
mm,
gait analysis systems now, which are coming into
yeah.
play a bit more. Some people love them, some people don't really think anything of them. Um, Personally, I'm on the fence about it at the moment. I think there's some good ones out there. I don't own one because I don't think I. This isn't meant to come across as being arrogant, but I don't think I need it with slow mo software on my phone and what
Mm.
we're doing at the moment.
Slow-mo is great. I tell clients all
Yeah.
the time, I'm like, take
And
your video out, slow-mo it, send it.
I think the main problem is with a lot of the things that we can do now is just the cost implication for the owner.
Yeah.
So obviously, with more things that you have to be able to, as a professional, as a business, you have to be able to pay for that, and so that cost then has to go
Mm,
on to the owner. Um, and I think that's where shoeing will stall for the average horse is because the average
cost.
owner
Mm,
cost and not understanding or not being able to afford it is one thing, but not understanding why the horse would benefit from X, Y, and Z.
mm,
And because actually that's where like your average owner horse will fall down is
mm,
because they can't afford to do pads, packing, bar shoes, etc., every shoeing for the next 10 years. Because actually, a lot of horses like having extra on there. And also the thought process that the horse is wrong, the horse is broken,
mm.
it's got something on it. It's not broken. I've got different sorts of shoes that I wear for different sorts of things. And
Yes.
I've got friends of mine that have got orthotics in their shoes because they need them to
Mm,
be happy walking. And it's the
mm.
same with horses. Some horses just like having pads and packing on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I would agree. And that's that importance of, and actually you mentioned it earlier when you were saying not we don't always have to watch them walk up after before a treat before you work on them. And but at the same time, you still would never, or would you shoe a horse from the stable and do no assessment?
no, I'd always
Would you
assess them.
always make sure that you at least take them out the stable, even
I'd
if
al-
it's just
I'd always make sure that I watch it walk out the stable
Mhm,
and watch it walk back to the stable or back to the field
mhm,
to make sure it's sound. A lot of the time, I would have seen it being worked beforehand anyway. So a lot of clients send us videos all the time, and I just
mhm,
catch up on them when I need to.
mhm,
Um, or watching clients online doing tests and things like that. That's a
mhm,
great way of seeing how that horse is moving.
Yeah.
So I'll always watch it walk. If we've had a problem, or if I haven't seen it trot for a couple of shoeings, then we'll watch it trot.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll always assess it statically as well. So before we start, we'll always have a look around it, go, how
Yeah.
is it looking at the end of its cycle? Now,
Yeah.
most of our horses are shod on a 4 or 5 week rotation. We don't go over 5 weeks really,
Mhm.
because I feel that the imbalances become too much after 5 weeks.
Mm.
And that changes slightly for some laminitics where you just need to grow some foot in the right direction. So you put a clog on, or a glue on, or an imprint, or glue on shoe of subscription, let that foot grow for
Mm.
like maybe 6 or 7 weeks, and then you reassess it after that. But that's a slightly different kettle of fish. But most of
Mm.
ours are shot on 4 or 5. So actually, when they're on that cycle, we can just stay on top of it as well. And you're making minor changes rather than major changes every time, which
Yeah.
again means that when you're assessing it statically, and when you've watched it walk towards you, when you've watched it walk away, you've assessed it in where you're going to be shoeing it, you've looked at that horse, you've seen how it's carrying itself, you've seen how it's standing, you've seen its muscle development.
Mm.
Because we're not shoeing mega amounts of horses, you can normally remember your horses as well. And if you can't, then that's where the wonders of a mobile phone and a picture takes place. Or you ask your owner, because they'll have taken 8 million photographs of their pony.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can assess how that horse has developed. And
Mm.
actually, from that, and from communications with people like yourself and the vets and all that jazz, you can go, well, this worked last time, or actually, we've got one at the moment that I saw with the vet the other day. It had been a bit on and off lame for a few months. It was as kind of I'd looked at it, I'd made some tweaks and changes, hadn't really managed to get to the bottom of it. The vet looked at it. We had a bit of a discussion about it. We wanted to keep it in exactly the same shoe profile this time, but next time we're going to change it because we've then got a benchmark of where we're at. And then we both agreed that it needed more doing to it, but we both agreed that actually, for a veterinary benchmark point of view, we wanted to leave it as it was for the next 4 weeks. In 4 weeks' time,
Mm.
we'll make that change. It's a
Mm.
month. I know when I go back to it what those speaks should look like. Interestingly, with this one, it had grown an astronomical amount of foot in 4 weeks, which said
Mm.
something, considering
Mm.
that everything else was on a normal plane and narrow in that yard, which says that it's been in pain, because with an increased blood supply, you get increased with a pain response. You normally get an increased blood supply. With
Mm.
increased blood supply, you get more foot growth. So for
Okay.
us on that horse in general, we went, well, it was just stacking things up to
Mm.
make, for the vet, to allow the vet to then go, this is the diagnosis that they were making for that horse,
Mm.
rather than me going, well, I think we should do this, but
Mm.
this is
It is actually true. I mean, I work slightly differently. I don't see clients every 4 weeks, but I will often say to my clients, "What's your far?" I always say to my clients, "What's your farrier said? Any changes there?" Because you guys, besides the owner who sees them every day, see them more often than someone like myself. So I would always say, "Has the farrier noticed any changes? Are they?" If the owner says to me, "Oh, they just feel very stiff behind," I will ask and say, "Okay, well." Your farrier saw them a week ago. How were they to shoe behind? Were they struggling? And then I might get the owner to say, actually, when he left, he did say, really struggled on the right hind. And then again, that from my perspective really helps me because I'm thinking, okay, so the farrier, obviously you're holding the leg up in a longer position than someone like I would, or the owner would when picking the feet out. So it actually helps when I get feedback from the farrier. And even if, like you said, it's a simple thing of the owner taking responsibility and going, right, farrier's been today, stand the horse up, level ground, take a picture, do it again in 4 weeks. Yes, there might not be significant change, but like you said, in some cases, there actually is a big change that would be really helpful to your body worker, to your vet, things like that, who don't see the horse. I think out of all the professionals in the industry, you're probably working more closely with the horses then
I
unless there's been a rehab case and
yeah.
the physio's there every week.
So Emily, my wife, did the maths a little while ago on whether it'd be better to date a vet or a farrier, and she works out that over the course of a horse's lifespan, you'd be better off shacking up with a farrier than a vet, because you get your money back. Um, but I think it's, for me, seeing them regularly means that you can jump on anything that's a problem. and you
Yeah.
can jump on anything that is looking bad before it looks worse. So like if you get back to a horse after 7 weeks and it's looking shocking, like the shoeing's looking not great, you go, well, that's because it's been on 7 weeks and it's grown about that much foot. Like it's grown 1.5 inches a foot, and you're just going back to where you were 7 weeks ago. Whereas if you get back after 5 weeks and you're going, right, it's not looking how I was thinking it was going to look after this period of time. Why is that? And you look at the horse subjectively and you trot it up and you go, well, actually, this has changed. Or you go, well, is it because we need to change the shoeing package on it? So is it because I need to give it more width and length, in which case that foot won't grow over the shoe as much? And if so, can I do that within the time frame that I have? The shorter the cycle, the tighter you can fit that shoe as well. So if you're shoeing a hunter that is ploughing through a bog at the front of the field, then if you're shoeing it on a 3-week rotation or a 4-week rotation, A, you know it's not going to be wearing out your shoes as badly, which means you're not going to get as much of a shoe loss. And B, you can shoe it short and tight, because actually in front, and then give it a little bit of support behind, because you know that you're going to be reassessing that balance in 4 weeks' time.
Which goes by really quickly.
Which goes by incredibly quickly. If you're shoeing a children's pony at the bottom of the field that's had a couple of problems, and you go, right, we'll see it in 4 weeks or 5 weeks, because actually then I know that I will be making adjustments as and when I see them, and I'll be able to keep that horse in a better routine and a better schedule and a better working life than I know then I will be able to keep it if I was on a 6 or 7 week or an 8 week.
Yeah.
Also, if you've got your horse on a 7 or an 8 week rotation, and you ring up your farrier and you go, have you booked it in? And he goes, well, I'm away on holiday for 2 weeks. And then you go, well, I'm away on holiday for 2 weeks after that. Suddenly, your 7 weeks becomes 12, and you're going, oh, I need a new farrier. My horse's feet look like shit. And you're like, it was not your folks' fault. It's because you're not keeping it on rotation.
Again, communication, right?
Communication. And don't. I saw a post on, or it was Emily's, my mother-in-law saw a post online that she spoke to me about on a group, and it was, oh, my horse's feet have started to toe in lows since September. What should I do about it? And everybody was like, get a new farrier, get a new farrier, get a new farrier. Nobody asked, what rotation is it on? Is it on? Have you spoken to your farrier about this? And is it on a shorter rotation? Because if your horse's feet are going like that over time, you've got to do something to change it. And if your farrier's not doing anything to change that, then that's one thing. And that's where you find another professional. If they're going, I don't know what to do, and you go, right, can we call in somebody to help you out? And this is what we don't do in our industry, is we go, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need to get on the phone to a friend that does know what they're doing, or another professional. Because 9 times out of 10, if I go in to see a horse that somebody else has been shoeing, and they're like, look, I really like him, we just need a bit of support through this, I won't end up taking the horse on. I'll shoot it like 4 times, normally with that farrier there. And then they'll go back to that farrier, because I'm just there to facilitate a change in a positive way. And then it goes back to that farrier. But we don't do that enough in our industry. We don't know, we don't hold up our hands and go, I don't know what I'm talking about. We go, oh, I've passed my diploma, I know everything. We've got
It is true.
Got a WhatsApp group with a group of friends. We're all farriers. We're all qualified at about the same time. That is just piled high of pictures,
Case studies,
and video
yeah,
going, I did this, what do you reckon? Or I've got this to shoot tomorrow. What am I going
this
to
is
do?
what I'm thinking of doing. What do you?
I am out of ideas on this one.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? And I think that's a really important thing as well, is if you are having problems with your horse's feet, say to your farrier, look, do you think we need to move it onto a shorter schedule? Or if your farrier is telling you and going, I really want to see this in 4 weeks' time, and you go, I don't want you to see this in 4 weeks' time, they're not saying that because they want to make more money and they want to
There's
finish.
a reason.
There's a reason for that. Then they don't want to shoe any more horses than they have to.
Yeah.
Because it hurts at the end of the day. But what we're doing is you're going, well, actually, I'm looking at your horse now, and out of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of horses that I've seen over
Mm.
my career, I'm telling you that I think that your horse would benefit from going on a shorter cycle, because then we'd have to do less to it every time,
Yeah.
which would mean its feet weren't looking like this, and you weren't
Yeah.
putting shoes.
Yeah. And then you weren't going on Facebook and asking external people who don't know your horse when you should maybe go internal first and speak to your team.
Yeah, and if you can't speak to your team because your team aren't approachable,
Change
then
your
you need
team.
to find a new team.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I actually wanted to just ask you, you might have to have a little thinking moment on this.
Mhm.
Could you share one of your most memorable experiences that you've had with working with horses over your years? Is there something that's really stood out?
Um,
Good, bad?
I really enjoy working with the little laminated ponies at the bottom of the garden that you get right, and then you see the kid riding it, like doing their few little competitions on it. I love that when you can make a change.
Mm,
Doing the big things is really cool. Like Tokyo was amazing, but
mm,
watching some little kid get their pony back when they've written it off and mum's kind of prepping them that it might be the end is a different thought process, is a different thing altogether, and that's what I really like.
mm.
I wouldn't say there's any. I mean, there's standout moments being abroad, which is awesome. But I think for me, the
Those
standout
small
moment, the
moments.
little
Yeah,
is the little wins,
yeah.
because you don't get your little wins all the time.
Mm,
But it's your little wins and your little getting this horse back for this child that's trying to just loves their pony and wants to ride it. That's the little wins for me. That
and maybe it goes into because the kind of higher you go, I know myself working at that level, especially the elite level, it's fantastic, and you might see more fancy places if you want to say that, or work with some real fantastic and talented horses and riders. But for some reason, I think the expectation's higher then as well, just to come and sort the issue out. Whereas when you do help the kid with the pony, that's their life, and that's what makes them so happy. So by the time they are able to ride again, they just are beaming.
and that kid with the pony hasn't got 10 other ponies
Yes,
that are worth ten
also
million
true.
pounds a piece,
Yeah.
whereas they've only got the one, and they're
Mm,
and mum and dad might not be able to afford to buy another one, or
yeah.
there's lots of variables, but they've just got one pony, and you can help that out, and they can start riding again, and they're
Mm,
really happy about that. And again, I really like doing the performance stuff, because I always think what I learned doing the performance horses, I can then, it's easier to push down to low the lower level horses,
mm,
because you're going, well, actually, I've tried this now on 6 or 7 performance horses, and it worked really well for them, or
mm,
20 or 30 or whatever it is. So the chances of it working really well for your horse that's got a very similar problem is
mm,
high. Whereas
mm.
you're not going, let's just give it a punt, and I'm going to charge
Yeah,
you some money. And then if it doesn't work, I'm going to charge you some more money to do something else. And if that does, you know what I mean? You've got,
yeah,
whereas with a
yeah.
performance horse, you've got to get it. What was the word I'm looking for? Your expectations are higher,
I think
because
it's expectation. Yeah.
they want it to be ridden tomorrow, and it needs to be
Mm,
right tomorrow.
yeah.
Um, and then we're going here tomorrow, then we're in France the day after, and then we're over to Germany. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
There's that, but and getting them right and going and winning and doing all this
Mm,
jazz is really really awesome. I'm not taking that away. And I've been lucky enough to travel the world from shoeing, and that's
yeah.
awesome as well. And like the Olympics was amazing, and lecturing in Canada was brilliant. But as I said, like being able to transfer that skill set and doing something that's just helping that pony out, that little kid's going to ride,
Yeah.
seeing them ride it, seeing them really happy riding it, that for me is the essence of why I enjoy my job.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's well, it's a nice way to kind of come to an end. I know I sent you questions to answer,
Mhm.
and you've picked three. I think actually a few of you might have answered already, but I'll just quickly ask you them. What are the most common misconceptions about your profession or the equestrian world that you'd like to correct?
that there's not a one-stop fix for everything. Barefoot isn't going to solve all your problems, nor are shoes. If somebody is, I think this is it. If somebody is telling you that their way is the only way that's going to work, I can guarantee you that on 99% of horses, it will not work. And I think that's what I'd put up on a billboard. That was one of your questions. That's what I put up on a billboard about life as an entity, but especially within the equestrian world. If you've been given one way or the highway, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
And
do you think that's again because of the statement of dropping your ego? Because one recipe doesn't work for the same 10 horses, and it's like if you're if you've been told this is the only way this is going to work, is that person coming from a place of ego and fear as opposed to going, this might work, it might not work, but we'll try. We've got the team saying, we're all in agreement, and this is probably the best solution we have at the moment, given what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I think I think you just summed it up. And I think that if you're coming at it from that point of view, where you've got the team together and you've gone, right, this is what we're going to try. If it doesn't work, then we've got other options. But if you've got one person that's coming in and going, actually, the only thing we're going to do to this horse is this, and
that will solve all your problems.
They're very. There's some people out there, and it's both sides of the argument. It's not just on the barefoot argument. It's not just on the shod argument. There's people out there on both sides of the argument that are really fanatical about their way. And I think if you look throughout history, fanatics haven't always ended up in the best positions in the world, because at some point they're going to be proved wrong. If somebody's telling you that they can't back up what they're saying through some form of science, be it an X-ray or a paper that's out there, or veterinary work, etc., then yes, it might be a new thing and it might be amazing. But you've got to question it, because and also, if people aren't going to answer your questions, if people shut you down and just tell you you're wrong, then they're not the right people to be around and have on your team. You want a team that you can talk to, and you want them all to be able to talk to each other.
Well answered. And the last one here is, in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life with horses?
It is not chasing numbers. So like when you first start out, you want to be showing everything, and then you get to a point where and I got to a point, and actually I was like, if I'm doing the numbers that I'm doing on my own, I can't do a good job. So I've got a team around me now that help. So we have to do numbers to a degree, because we have to be shoeing enough to pay everybody's wage bills, or trimming enough to pay everybody's wage bills. But essentially, it's not. I know that for a new horse, I will be booking a minimum of an hour and a half in for an appointment, because then I don't need to rush. And sometimes it's going to take longer than that. Sometimes it'll take shorter than that. But if I'm on my own and something complicated, a minimum of an hour and a half, because that's how long it's going to take me to do it. Whereas 5-10 years ago, it would have been get through it as quickly as possible, on to the next one, get through that as quickly as possible. But by slowing down, I've been able to improve what I'm doing and the way that I work around horses, which is only beneficial for the horse itself.
I like that. That's the end of those questions. And I just have one more thing. The last guest left a question not knowing who this was for, and they've actually asked, thinking back on your life, did you ever have a sliding door moment where there potentially could have been a situation that you have gone a different way in your career? I want to say it was that girlfriend that got you into farriery.
I'll take that.
But I'm thinking, was there another moment, or was that the moment? Could Harry?
That's probably the most major moment. I definitely had times during my apprenticeship where I wanted to bail and quit because it was hard. There's been a couple. I'd say the moments in my apprenticeship where I wanted to quit were probably sliding door moments, because you could have just walked away straight away and gone back to doing something that's not horse related. But yeah, I'd probably say that was a sliding door moment. And it was the fact that it stuck in my head for so long as well, and it took me a long time to act on it. But yeah, I'd probably say that was the sliding door moment.
Well, thank God you didn't. Thank God you persisted and
Yeah,
came out the other end. And I bet Emily's very happy because she's ended up marrying a farrier.
pros and cons, I believe. When you're out at 6 o'clock at night looking at a horse and there's 2 children that are screaming.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast today.
Not a problem.
And yeah, we will end it there.
Excellent.